speed things up just a little bit. First thing we're going to talk about today is the largest port in the U.S. is likely going on strike on October 1st, just 10 days away. And this puts literally half of the United States goods at risk. Biden is not going to do anything about it because he's afraid it'll hurt his chances at elections with the union members. So the rest of us have to suffer. So he can try, not just Biden, but Biden-Harris. So the rest of us have to suffer. So he can hopefully get some votes in. I don't know about you, but if everybody starts not being able to buy goods right before the election, I think that'll have a bigger impact on everything than just the union stuff. So first story we'll get into today, the largest port on the U.S. East Coast, and I believe down in the Gulf Coast as well, New York, New Jersey, begins prepping for what could be the first union strike since 1977. The Port of New York, New Jersey executives tell CNBC they're preparing for a complete work stoppage by the International Longshoremen's Association, the largest North American union for maritime workers. The ILA represents over 85,000 port workers, and a strike would shut down 5 of the 10 busiest ports in North America and a total of 36 ports along the East and Gulf coasts. Close to half, 43 to 49% of all monthly U.S. imports would be impacted, representing billions of dollars in trade, and logistic firms are preparing contingency plans last used during COVID and 2018 tariffs. Currently, there's an estimated $34 billion in freight en route to these ports on 147 ocean vessels. Now, when ports shut down like this, basically these ships that have deliveries park outside of the ports and wait. And when that's happening, other shipments will not get sent. So when the ports open, the ships that are there will likely be able to unload, but there may be a gap because they haven't sent other ships on the way to replace them. So we may see some mess ups in the supply lines. As a reminder, make sure to get some food, medicine, water, fuel, anything you need, because this could screw things up a little bit. They say Port of New York, New Jersey executives tell CNBC they've begun preparations for a potential complete work stoppage by the International Longshoremen's Association, the largest North American union for maritime workers. The ILA represents more than 85. Why am I reading this twice? They printed it twice. What is up with that? Why did they do that? They say talks with port ownership broke down over the summer, and it remains unclear how much progress, if any, is being made. The ILA rank and file recently voted unanimously to authorize a strike, and the group, which represents port management, the United States Maritime Alliance, recently stated that it believes the union has already made the decision to strike. Beth Rooney, port director of the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, told CNBC on Thursday the individual ocean carriers and terminal operators are announcing they're ramping down of operations to avoid a pileup of containers. The Port of New York, New Jersey, has been involved in discussions with ocean carriers and terminal operators about managing cargo leading up to an interruption, ensuring appropriate measures are in place to complete cargo movements off the terminals before any shutdown. A number of ocean carriers have announced their plans in terms of embargoing export cargo coming from the East Coast from the Midwest, said Rooney. So the further ahead that the cargoes might be coming to us from within the hinterland, the earlier that it would be embargoed, she said. If there is a strike and operations cease, the vessels would either wait in a designated area or slow steam as they did during COVID to delay their arrival. Once the strike is over, the Coast Guard would lead the charge in an orderly flow of vessels entering the port. According to Kepler, or Kpler, Kepler, 147 vessels, a combination of container ships and roll-on, roll-off vessels, are en route to the East Coast and Gulf ports by October 1st, with 38 of those vessels headed to the Port of New York and New Jersey. The total carrying capacity of the inbound vessels is 686,181 20-foot equivalent container units. The value of that freight is upward of $34 billion based on an MDS Transmodel estimate of $50,000 per container. In a recent blog post, Joe Mancini, vice president of the North American Surface Transportation at C.H. Robinson, wrote that not only the U.S. companies and suppliers would be impacted, but also supply chains across Europe, Oceania, Latin America, and Asia. While the APAC region typically has more options to shift freight to the West Coast, over half of the automotive freight coming in today is heavily dependent on the East Coast. For example, the Germany to Charleston and Savannah corridor is crucial for European automakers, which would be shut down in the event of a strike. Currently, there are only 2 container service loops operating between Europe and the West Coast. and the U.S. West Coast. The Biden administration has said it will not invoke powers under the Taft-Hartley Act to force union members to go back to work, as first reported by CNBC, and urged the parties to return to the bargaining table. We never invoked Taft-Hartley to break a strike and are not considering doing it now, a Biden administration spokesperson told CNBC on September 4th. ILA President Harold Dagger recently warned at a union meeting that if members were forced to go back and work, they would deliberately slow down. That would only add to the pileup containers crippling supply chain fluidity. This is the big change. This is a big challenge. As number one, if the Biden does not invoke the, what do they call it? The Taft-Hartley to break the strike, they don't want to piss off basically 85,000 members of the union, because unions are all in on the Democrats, at least in the past. And so they don't want to piss them off right before the election. That'll impact 85,000 union workers. However, after October 1st, if all of a sudden people are getting supply line slowdowns, they aren't able to order their crap from Amazon and China, and they start missing goods, that may actually impact the elections even more. And, of course, smartly so, the Trump administration, or I guess you'd say the Trump administration, the people around him and his campaign, will rightly target Harris for doing this because this is under her watch. The Port of New York, New Jersey has joined other ports that have publicly posted strikes contingency plans. The Port of Houston, for example, has published its strike prep guidance for customers. The port has indicated it may extend gate hours during the week of September 23rd if necessary. It is also planning to open the gates on Saturday, September 28th, subject to confirmation early next week. The vessels scheduled to come into the East Coast and Gulf ports have been traversing the ocean since early to mid-August. In an advisory to clients, the Georgia Ports Authority recommended import delivery well before October 1st to minimize any disruptions, and added it will offer weekend gates to support this effort. On exports, the port explained both refrigerated and non-refrigerated containers will be received up to September 30th. Now that basically gives us 6 days, if you guys need to order something, whether it's online, from a doctor, from whether it be food or other things, go get it now this week, because it's in the news, but it's not hitting mainstream news, at least so far yet. Go out and get the products you need this week, because the resupply of them may be challenging. Maybe not, you don't know, but at least get ahead of the curve. Make sure you're stocked up in your groceries, your refrigerated items, and you have emergency things taken care of. They continue on. The contingency plans are a result of the stalemate between the International Longshoremen's Association 6-year contract with the United States Maritime Alliance. The two sides are far apart on wages and automation. The ILA announced on June 10th the suspension of talks over the use of an automated gate system in Mobile, Alabama, and other ports. Logistic experts have told CNBC in recent months there's been an exodus of cargo from the East to West Coast in anticipation of a potential strike. So if they've been in talks basically for since June 10th, well, let me correct that. They've been in talks, and they suspended talks on June 10th, and they still are far apart on wages and automation. That means that likely in the next 10 days, they're not going to come to a consensus. They say anticipation of additional freight. Mario Cordero, CEO of the Port of Long Beach in California, said it is equipped to handle an uptick in cargo if a labor strike at the East Coast and Gulf Coast ports does occur. The month of August was the port's strongest month in its 113-year history, with imports surging 40% year over year and exports rising 12% year over year. Our terminal operators are also prepared to flex their gate hours as necessary, and our overflow site, the short-term overflow resource yard or store facility at Pier S, is open and has available capacity, said COO Noel Hasgaba at the news conference. In recent comments to rank-and-file union members, Daggett also invoked the last ILA strike in 1977, when Daggett was among ILA members who traveled to the West Coast during the 44-day strike to make sure the West Coast port workers supported its efforts. Now, interestingly, if we look back to what happened in 1977 and you look at what's happening today, it's inflation. Inflation went crazy in the 1970s. Inflation went crazy today. And now the port workers are saying, our standards of living are slipping. We can't afford as much as we used to. Now we want a raise. And the raise just may not be there. It's hard to tell. They say the Port of Los Angeles Executive Director Gene Soroka told CNBC, I believe Harold Daggett has to say that, and I don't have any evidence right now of cargo ships taking a left-hand turn that normally go to the eastern Gulf Coast port and coming here to the west, or specifically Los Angeles. There's been a decades-long tradition between labor organizations that one will not take advantage of another's collective bargaining process. And as you rightly say, this hasn't happened since the 1970s. I don't see it happening again here. The ILA did not respond to a request for comment. So that's going to be kind of interesting if the West Coast union workers are saying, we're not going to help you circumnavigate our other, even if it's a different union, we're not going to help you navigate the embargo on the other coast. You're just going to have to deal with this at some point. It'll be interesting to see what they do with it. They say the Port of Los Angeles reported a near record 960,597 20-foot equivalent units in August, a 16% increase over the previous year. The month was the busiest non-pandemic month ever at the port. The Port of Los Angeles is 17% ahead of its 2023 pace, already moving nearly 1 million more containers than it did last year, only 8 months into 2024. One of the things that I wonder that may be having an impact on this, and I'm not sure it does or not, but since the pandemic, we've shut down a lot of companies. We had a lot of companies fail, and we're importing more than ever. So we're seeing large import increases, as they mentioned above, where they're seeing a 40% year-over-year import rise, but we're only exporting 12% year-over-year. So it does sound like we're actually importing much more than we have previously. And while we're exporting a little bit more, it's not keeping up with imports. That'll be important to see what happens when it comes to how job stability here is in the United States, as well as inflation. They say congestion levels are already being forecast by the maritime industry. Sea Intelligence has estimated a one-day strike by the ILA would take 5 days to clear. A one-week strike in October could cause slowdowns until mid-November. 2 weeks would take you into January because of the congestion of the ships and the backup of containers. Fears of a strike by the labor union pushed peak season earlier by a month this year, as shippers wanted to ensure their holiday products would be in before a work stoppage. Based on Zenata data, East Coast labor has seen a decrease of almost 2% in import tonnage processed between Q4 of 2023 and Q2 of 2024. So if they have a one-week strike, we have slowdowns until mid-November. So in the first week of October, we will know there's going to be slowdowns until November. 2 weeks takes us into January. So even if, and yes, you're right, by the way, one of you guys in chat said they planned this. You're exactly right. They planned this to put pressure on the union and on everybody, and because this also puts a lot of pressure coming from retailers that are trying to get their products out in time for the Christmas season. This is good timing, although they did start it back in June, and both parties are nowhere near an agreement on meeting up with the issue. So it's interesting that by doing it now, not only will this affect the elections, this may very well affect Christmas season, and this may hurt a lot of retailers. So there's going to be a lot of pressure on both sides to get this fixed. And in a case like that, the pressure usually goes on the people negotiating with the union, not the union itself. The East Coast share of total container imports in the U.S. from the Far East decreased from 34.4% in Q4 of 2023 to 32.6% in Q2 of 2024. Meanwhile, the West Coast share increased from 57.7% in Q4 2023 to 60% in Q2 2024. The remainder of containers were imported through the U.S. Gulf Coast. Trade diversion impacts ILA workers since they receive a royalty on the amount of containers they move. An analysis from MITRE estimates that a 30-day strike centered at the ports of New York and New Jersey could result in an economic impact as high as $641 million per day. In Virginia, an economic impact of $600 million per day is forecast, or roughly $18 billion over 30 days. Export impacts at Houston operations could reach $51 million per day and $41 million per day for imports. Transport companies tell CNBC they're continuing with their container diversions. Seco Logistics transitioned some clients to the West Coast and is moving eastbound containers from West Coast to help mitigate some of the congestion. A CSX spokesperson told CNBC, "We're closely monitoring the situation and will proactively communicate with our customers on any operational actions that may be necessary." Goetz Allebrand, head of Ocean Freight Americas at DHL Global Forwarding, tells CNBC it is diversifying client routes and also transloading. We're also utilizing piles to manage the flow of containers, said Allebrand. We're aware of the backlog caused by the limited supply of rail cars on certain lanes, and our teams are actively working to explore additional rail and trucking options to minimize disruptions. Air freight, although more expensive, is also an alternative for time-sensitive or high-value goods. Paul Brashear, vice president of global supply chains at ITS Logistics, tells CNBC it has implemented its post-COVID and 2018 tariff contingency operations. We have repositioned truck chassis and are grouping trucks in the Southeast, Gulf, and Mid-Atlantic regions to maximize the movement of freight at the ports and have extended hours. We're then putting the containers at yard we have expanded for later delivery. So this is ramping up. As I've mentioned before, you do always want to make sure that you have your medicines you need, you have your foodstuffs, at least, I'd say a few months worth of backup food, emergency water, emergency fuel. Make sure you keep those things on hand. You know, it's always a good idea. And while right now it may be a port or a union strike, it also may be something like Russia or China doing a hack, or somebody hacking for Bitcoin, or you've got natural catastrophe like hurricanes and other things. As we ramp up here, there's just more and more that seems to disrupt our way of life. And I think it's important to make sure that you go out there, get everything handled, make sure that it's all taken care of, and then you're good to go. And then you at least have a couple months of padding. You may not need to use it, but if you get long-term foodstuffs, it's a smart thing. Me personally, I have... if you go to the grocery store, and this is how easy it is. If you go to the grocery store and look at chili and soups, some stews, and some other things like that, many of those cans are good for 2 to 3 years. Peanut butter is good for 2 years. Now, yeah, you can't get bread and milk and other things like that, but you can get some staples that'll at least give you your calories. You can get some protein powders if you happen to drink like whey or vegan protein powders. Most of those are good for a couple years shelf life. That'll give you the protein, that'll give you the calories. All of it's good for multiple years. And then over the course of the next year, you use a little bit of it that might go bad, and then just replenish it with some that's, newer, and then they're good for 2 years out. If you kind of, cycle through your foodstuffs like that, you can keep a running 6 month to 1 year supply, as long as those are foods you like and plan to eat on a regular basis, and kind of work through them. If you happen to have a home, yes, it's expensive, but you can get yourself a $600,000, $800,000 like Sub-Zero floor freezer. You can put hundreds of pounds of goods in that, and oftentimes they're going to be good for 6 months or a year. So, it doesn't hurt to protect yourselves and at least be prepared. Today's sponsor that I want to quickly talk about is me. I'm today's sponsor, guys. I am dropping subscription costs to betterbachelor.locals.com so you guys can become a supporter. It is now $3 for a year. Now you can do it month by month if you want to, and that way you give me $3, and you're a supporter for a month, and then you say, okay, I changed my mind or whatever. You can cancel it. You're out $3, or you can give one time $36, and that'll renew yearly. And so you can give one time and then not worry about it again. And it's really easy. You just click the subscribe button. You hit the monthly or annual, depending if you want to do the $3 or the $36 for a year. It's normally $5 and $50. So I'm basically like giving this to you for like half price. And then in the promo code, if you want to do the monthly, you can use Odd Man Out 2. Or if you want to do the yearly, you can do Odd Man Out 3. Because we do awesome things like stream NFL football games, we do UFC Fight Night, and every Friday night we do movie night, where we'll do various movies. And this isn't where you have to go to Amazon and purchase the movie and we stream along together. You just go there, you tune into a live stream, and we watch a movie. And the reason why I do that is because locals, I'm the moderator. I'm the only moderator there. So become a supporter today, guys. It is wicked cheap. I've made it the cheapest I've made it ever because I really want to get a big community going so we can have a great group of guys over there and hang out and have fun together, watching the movies, watching the streams, all that stuff. Okay, now back to me.